Man, one of the issues I think today, what's hindering authentic leadership, way too many access points into people's lives. Relationships are access points.
Like social media.
Political ideologies. I think it's going to lead to a lot of just internal crisis. And when you have so much access, it's overwhelming. Hey, what's up, guys? I want to welcome you back to another episode of the New Rules Podcast. It is your boy, Adrian. And I was getting ready to say something very nice about Bree, but as I'm doing this little intro over here, she's like mocking me.
You were.
She's mocking my intro.
Y'all didn't hear what we were talking about beforehand, though. He basically said he hated me.
Whatever. Well, as you guys can hear, it's Bree.
Hi, it's Breezy.
Oh, my gosh. Bree, what's happening? How are you today?
All good things. You know, we're moving offices soon.
We are moving offices.
Moving party.
We are moving offices soon again. And all that stuff, I think it's exciting once you get there, but it's always the in-between parts, So I know that's been a project you've been working on. Again, we're not just only moving, just us. We have about anywhere between 15, 20 people who are always in our office, who work underneath all our different things. And so we're trying to get them. And so Bree really thinks a ton about, we care a lot about culture, and she thinks a lot about culture. So, trying to get the new office design in a way that's continuing pushing creativity and upgrading and stuff like that. So, so you've been a little bit busy, burning on both ends doing that, just kind of leading the consulting and changing the world work. So, nothing.
You know me.
Boss moves.
Nothing light.
Nothing light. So sweet. Well, hey, we are so excited that you're here. If you are new here to the New Rules community, we just want to let you know the point of this podcast is this. We really want to unlock authenticity. We believe that in this day and era that we're living in, that the world's in desperate need of authentic leaders who write new rules. Again, we're living in what one man has called the gray zone. And so meaning that the rules of the game have changed. And so we don't even know what the rules are. And so now what's really happening is that there's so much opportunity, but it's really going to be to those who are authentic. We define authentic here as self-aware and those who have resilience to remain self-aware. So that's really what we're about. We're just about how do we help develop and build authentic leaders, whatever space and place you find yourself. So, man, make sure you like, share, follow us now. Again, we have at Write New Rules, Instagram, on TikTok. Make sure you give us a follow. Make sure you write us a review wherever you listen to your podcast at. So, man, with that being said, Bree, before we jump in, what you want to talk about? Sometimes this is kind of the pre-workout. Before we jump into the real thing, we kind of have a little pre-workout. What are we talking about today? A little pre.
Speaking of authentic leaders.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
Your son, Jalen.
Oh, boy.
Just spent his first day of school.
Dude, he did. Yep. Yesterday, as we're recording this, it was his last day of high school. So, man, and it has been
his last first day.
Last first day,
Not
yes.
his last day.
Whatever it is. Yeah, whatever it is, it's going to be it's the last. It's so...
we're done.
We're done. But no, he did. And so, we have a junior, a junior, and a seventh grader. And so, my man is graduating. And you know what? It's been such a lot of nostalgic moments, a lot of moments where, as I've said earlier, I said on a few podcasts, I've been really working on this idea of practicing presence or just kind of being in the moment. And the other night, we're actually in the gym where he plays basketball, so he's in there working out, and I was just watching him, and it was kind of like, I felt like it was like a movie. And this happened the other morning when he was going to school, to where I've been, from the beginning. And some know, some may not know, I've mentioned it before, Jalen was born on the spectrum. We actually had a teacher at one point in time say, he'll never graduate high school. Go ahead, let him get his GED, all this. And it was kind of a crazy thing saying that to about a kid in 7th, 8th grade or whatever. It was all this stuff that was going on. As I was sitting there watching him work out, and I was watching him the next morning, it was like I got really, really just emotional because of the fact that, it's kind of like I know the origin story. It's kind of like I felt like I was watching. You see the movie, and you see the where they start the movie at the end, And it's like if somebody walked in, they would have no idea the kid was that he was born on the spectrum. They have no idea he didn't talk until he was 4. They have no idea some of the things he struggled with, to where now he goes to, probably he goes to the hardest academic school in our city. And if everything goes well, we'll graduate from that school. And and all the stuff. And people said he couldn't do it. And even some of this basketball stuff, hand-eye coordination was the kid couldn't really tie a shoe. until he was like 7, until he was like 8, 9 years old, because just of hand-eye. And now watching him dribble a basketball and do that stuff like that, it was just amazing. And I think that's what was really, really cool, is just when your kids, it's sad, but also when your kids get older, just when, you know, you've put so much time, energy, and effort, and they've put so much time, energy, and effort in watching them right now, it's just actually, you know, it's a sad moment, but also a really, really high moment. So, yeah, so it's just a new phase of life. Me and my wife were talking about it, man. We're like, you know, he'll be, you know, this year, and then next year, my daughter, Brooklyn, and then it'll just be, man, like, so we have 2 kids out of the house, which is wild. Like, I don't feel like, I mean, I got gray hair. You always tell me I'm old, but like, you know what I'm saying? But I don't feel that way. You know, it doesn't feel like I should be like, oh my gosh, like my kids are going to be in college. It's just, it's a very,
I don't feel that way either.
Yeah, it just feels very weird. But you don't feel that way? You're like, what, old?
I know, no, I don't feel that way. Like your kid, I don't feel like your kid should be going into college.
No, yeah, because I mean, man, you started off, what was Jalen was like 7th grade?
In 7th grade?
Yeah.
Maybe I started around when he was in 6th, and I actually
took over when
he was in 7th.
Yeah, so you've seen
which
all
is
that.
like, can we talk? I'm closer to Jalen's age.
That's wild.
I mean, Jalen's how many years behind me?
6, be 6.
Yeah.
Dude, that's freaking crazy. That's bananas. But it's wild. And then on top of that, I think that, you know, before I came in here, I was on the phone with one of my best friends, and we were just talking about, man, our kids lived through like a pandemic. Mm-hmm. Like they were isolated. Like, I think so many times we get on this generation, but I'm just like, man, them jokers are like kind of resilient. I mean, to have a perspective of that, it was hard for me in my 40s living through a pandemic and having to lead people. Now imagine being a kid and not knowing, you know, the stuff you know about life and you know, but if you're a kid and you're like, man, nobody's ever experienced, people are wearing masks. I'm hearing all these people, maybe these people are dying. Are we going to die? My grandparents going to die? What's going on with that? And then like, I can't go to school and see my friends. I'm in my house, and just the fact of those kids being able to come on the other side, I know there's been impact of it, but man, it is just amazing watching. You've been a part of that, like through a pandemic, I mean, through their growth through high school. So it's just been, and it feels like it just was yesterday. It really does. Like that whole thing of like, oh, you feel like yesterday? It really does. I'm like, it doesn't feel like, it feels like COVID just was yesterday, but then it also feels like COVID was like 10 years ago. You know what I mean? So like, what's been the biggest thing, I'll tell you, since you've been around our family so long, what's been the most like, what's been, I don't know, when you think about those with my kids and all that being there, and you've seen their growth, you know, and you're more closer age, what has been the thing you like, maybe, I don't know, notice, whatever, anything you want to share about that? And again, this is really not about me and my family and my kids, but it's just a topic we want to talk about. It's just like being a parent, and we always want to be authentic, but it's so we talk about family here. So what do you think?
Probably one of the coolest things is because, you know, obviously I don't have kids. So this is the first group of kids that I've seen and been with from a younger age. Ever and I guess like lived life with for a few years. Yep. And also the years from middle school to high school have such substantial developmental jumps. Yeah. Like when you think about an 8th grader and then you think about a 10th grader. Yep. So different. It's only 2 years. Yeah,
it's so true. It's really
so true. That's part of why I feel like it flies by, is because so much just matures in that time, not to its fullest obviously, but from what it was. Yep. And I think the coolest thing walking in with the youngest in elementary and both of the others in middle school is now seeing them, I guess the things that I had always envisioned for them, actually seeing it. Because when you're a kid, or when you're looking at a kid, you can kind of see who they're going to become as they mature, and you have a little bit of a vision for that, and hopefully it's not through your own grid. It's realistic, and you kind of have an idea of how they might struggle, but also the ways that they're going to grow in confidence. And so to see, especially all of them really, because Peyton is basically a high schooler, and emotionally, and so seeing them be so much more confident and just navigate the nuances of life, you can see the ways that they are a lot more self-differentiated, even from you two as parents. Yeah. And that it feels really special to be able to see that and see it closely, and see them be able to do that with your guidance, of course, but at the same time very naturally, because I think they were given a very particular and useful set of tools as they were growing up, and seeing them naturally use that.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to have I feel like not that frequently do you have to have very specific conversations with all of them that are like, here's this quality, here's how you embody this quality. Right now you are not doing, like, they just know those things.
Yeah.
And they have a little bit of the self-awareness to know when they're not showing up the way that they quite want to.
Yeah.
On the contrary to that, because of that, they can feel when they're missing the mark pretty heavily.
Yeah. No, and
that's not bad. No. I want to point that as it can be painful, but that's not always a bad thing.
No, I think that's a great way to put it. And I think for someone who comes from, for you becoming engrafted into our family, like you being able to see that, it's always, it's the hope of what you want your kids to be. And then you're like, man, you hope that, it's really all faith. You're like, I hope they're going to be this. I hope they can get this. I hope, just like, with Jalen, if he goes to prep school for a year and then goes to play college basketball, whatever he decides to do, it's like, I hope he's okay. You build these things. I think he's going to, that's what I think I could see him in college doing. But then you're like, but it's always that part of like faith that I think this could to happen. Then to actually see it. And you're like, oh, and I think sometimes as parents, man, being able to take a step back and, and I think this is applicable for anybody. Sometimes you need to step back and realize that to really evaluate things, because we're always trying to think about, man, what could be better, but sometimes it's good to evaluate to see where it's at. And so I think that was the other night when I was watching him. I'm like, yo, he's okay. He's okay. I didn't know if he ever would be okay. Like, I had no idea. You have a kid who's not talking. You're wondering, like, man, for the rest of his life, will we have to, take care of him? Would he ever have words? Would he have to be in some type of, would he ever go to graduate from a high school? Would he ever have any level of friendships? Like, those were all the things when they're telling you you're not staring down the barrel of a child that's on the spectrum and not talking. But just watching, and again, I always say, whenever I get an opportunity to say, to give so much credit, man, to my wife, because, man, for 2.5 years, once we found out, man, she kind of like paused her life to really spend like 30 to 36 hours a week, like just on the floor playing with him, helping, teaching, therapy, all these things. And then just my mother-in-law to, that support system to, speech therapist, Miss Lori, all these people coming around. And Wendy just was like there doing it. And she gave up a part of her like career and time. And we've seen over the years, she always says how God's given that back to her 100 times over. But it's been really, really cool to just kind of see that on the other end of it. And then also you see our kids go. And I want to tell everybody, those who are younger who listen to the pod, parents listen to the pod, whatever. If you don't have kids yet or you have kids yet, let me tell you this, having people older who they're not perfect, but they are really moving in the direction of modeling the values you talk about, get them around your kids. So like you being around there, the fact that we were talking, like our daughter texting you about a situation. And the fact that I don't need to know what's going on, because I know the wisdom and advice she's going to get is going to be spot on. And so I think that's one of the things I can always tell people that's been really helpful with I think any level of success with our children. We've got really good people around them that's close to their age, because it's just as much as I feel like I relate to my kids, want to connect to my kids, but there's just certain things they may not want to say to me, and that's okay. But as long as they got good advice, they're not freaking just only finding it out on Google or just talking to their friends, you know what I'm saying? So anyway, but no, it's just an interesting time. It's just an interesting time to be able to do it. But it's been it's a lot of hard work parenting. I'll tell you that. It is a lot of hard work, but super thankful, and we'll see what happens from here. So, well, guys, we are excited today to jump into our topic of the day. If you are new, we like to take a topic, something maybe stirring in my mind about really this idea of authentic leadership, to hopefully be something we can unpack, get you to think, maybe a thought that you've never thought about, but actually will be practical for your work, for your help, maybe for you. If you lead people, you can take it and you can actually start to apply it there in your home, for your kids, whoever, wherever you find yourself. But this is all about helping you think and actually uncover authenticity. So today, Bree, what are we talking about?
Today we're going to talk about a topic of access points. And fun fact, I think we've mentioned this before, but we do something with our staff called culture creators.
Yep.
And so typically we'll touch on topics with them that we'll kind of bring into the podcast because we think more people would like to hear about them.
Yeah.
And access points is one of them. Can you share a little bit about what access points is all about?
Yeah. What you said, our culture creators that we have, and I'll get to access points, it's something that I felt like one of the most important roles I have as a leader is culture. It is to make sure I'm a guardian of culture. So that is something we do every week, from all of our staff to interns to things like that, to really make sure the values, the culture of our organization kind of stays the same. And so and what I'll do is just things that sometimes they're around our values. We have something, our leadership essentials we do, but sometimes they're just really new thoughts. In the summer, during that, we've been doing something called mixtapes, just really thoughts. I haven't been speaking on the church side. I haven't been speaking a ton. I've been off for about 8 weeks, and so I just wanted to do something, man. What are just thoughts? Because I've been spending a lot of time, talking about practicing presence, being there. What are some thoughts I've been having lately about leadership? And so this idea came actually of access points. It actually came when we were in California. We were sitting in California, and I don't know if you remember this, but we were sitting in California. We were actually meeting with a potential client, and we were talking about Gen Z. And as we're talking about Gen Z, and everybody, and it's like how people will talk about this generation resilience, and they need resilience, they need to be resilient, they need to be tougher. You actually said something, and what you said, I don't know if you even remember. Do you remember what you said? No? Okay, well, I'll say it then. But what you ultimately ended up saying, Bree, you were like, man, this generation, people are telling us, man, we need to be be tougher. But there's so many different things thrown at us, so many things coming at us, so many different opportunities than before, and whatever. And then as soon as you were saying that, man, it's like my brain just started to go, everything just started to trigger. I'm like, oh my gosh, she is spot on. And so it made me start thinking about, man, one of the issues I think today, and what's hindering authentic leadership is the idea of access points. Way too many access points into people's lives. If you think about an access point, it's just an entryway. It's an entryway into something. It's an access point. An access point into a house or into a car or into a building or whatever. It's a way that there's entry that happens there. And what I've realized is that there are so many access points now to our lives. So many access points, touch points, ways that things can enter our lives all the time. And I don't think we ever really think about that. I mean, if you think about this, you always joke about this is that at night, because Bree, I do the full dad thing. So some of you guys know Bree lives with our family. And so one of the things that'll happen is that at night I'm full dad mode where I'm checking all the doors every night, make sure every door is locked, right? I want you to imagine in our house, if we lived in the middle of a city, like a wide open city, and just imagine there was 150 doors to get into my house. The level of how exhausting that'd be every single day to have to go and check every single door to make sure they're all locked. But that's kind of how our lives are. There's so many access points for other things to get into our lives. And I'm not saying all those things are bad things, but I do think we don't ever look at that, and I think that could be a hindrance to resilience. And we talk about in this whole thing of new rules about part of about authenticity is self-awareness and resilience. I think we lack resilience sometimes because I think we do not have the ability to cover all those access points.
So as you're talking, I can think of one example of an access point, which would be content, like social media. Mm-hmm. What are some other examples?
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, content for sure. I think, man, and let's take content. We'll get some others, but breaking content even down, because we'll just say that, and you're right. Oh man, content, social media, or whatever. Well, then let's break that to Threads, Twitter, Instagram, Snap, Facebook, Pinterest, TikTok. I mean, those are just 7. I just right there on and there's way more that I just said on social media apps, not including podcast. Then when you get into that whole thing, how many podcasts are you listening to? All right. Then you're talking about now Substack, blogs, news subscriptions. That's a whole other thing. YouTube. I didn't even bring up YouTube.
I know.
Then that YouTube. Then you go down the whole books. I mean, the YouTube rabbit hole you get down. I mean, all these access points. Then there's streaming networks. I mean, now it's there's all types of streaming networks, TV shows that you can jump into. Outside of that, I mean, you go into, start thinking about access points when you come into, man, actually your work. when you go to work. So, man, like friendships, relationships are like, relationships are access points. People, in your life and who I think fitness, taking care of your body, it's an access point. Man, you go to the gym, but what happens with fitness now? Man, the level of like, it used to just be back in the day, man, you go to the gym, you work out there, maybe it's a trainer, maybe not. Now you go to the gym. I mean, they got gyms on mirrors. They got Peloton. You go in there, you got mindfulness before you go.
I know. Let's not even think about recovery.
That's what I'm saying. You got
ice bath, saunas, steam room.
Dude, I mean, like, man, I don't know, Hungarian stretching. I don't know. You got stuff for days. I mean, that's just on the fitness tip. Okay, cool. Then it's like, man, okay, then you go down, here's an access point. Maybe how you're eating. All right. And so now and again, which I'm all, and again, I want to believe none of these things are bad.
Uber Eats.
That's to say, you have Uber Eats, you have DoorDash. Okay. Now, man, you're vegan. Okay. Then what does that look like going down that road? Okay. Gluten free. What does that look like going down that road? And you could just go on and on and on. And these are all good things. We're not talking about the negative access points. We're not talking about the negative access points today of the easy access to prescription drugs. The easy access, we're seeing the rise of things like, of other types of harmful drugs, fentanyl, on and on. Again, you could get into the idea of like the access now that we now have. When you talk about like, say just even like sex and sexuality, it used to be if you wanted to see anything that was that of someone who was nude, it was like, man, like there was like Playboy, there was like a or whatever it was. Now the access to just that. Again, last time I'd heard the stat, it was like the porn industry makes more money than Major League Baseball, football, basketball, and hockey combined. It's like access points everywhere for that. Gaming. We're not just talking about back in the day I had Nintendo. Or, man, now you're online. Now you got Twitch. Now, it's nonstop where you can go. And I think, so anyway, I know I just gave a lot, but these are all, and again, and I know there's probably, we didn't even get into political ideologies. Mm-hmm. Those are access points. So there's a lot of things I think that have access to our lives.
How do you think that impacts us as a society?
I think what it's leading to, isolation and loneliness. It would seem like it's more, and again, the stats are all there, to where we are statistically the most loneliest, like where people will say that the loneliest that we've ever been, since they've been recording, doing, stats on this type of stuff.
Why does that lead to that?
Because I think what it draws you to, a lot of stuff starts to draw you just to self. Because what will happen is that, think about this. I forgot what the name of it was, where there's a thing, I think it was in some country where kids were just like playing video games. Their parents were just like leaving food outside their door because they wouldn't come out. It was like a big thing. And so just imagine that. Just think about when you get, just think about at times you pick up your phone and like you jump on TikTok. And just how you'll just go for like, and you're not, you're just like, man, it's fun, it's casual, whatever. But just sometimes you can just go down these roads. Then, because I also think it becomes so much about internal you and not outward. Man, what am I doing for my betterment? All those things become more access points. Then some of these things do lead to, comparison. So that makes you feel like, man, I'm not good enough. I can't connect. I'm not whatever. It also, I think, gives some of these access points gives an illusion of deep connection. But they're not, I think there's something about physical presence that actually matters, so sometimes with all these access, I'm using, things that can make you feel like, on social or whatever, it can make you feel like you've got deep connections. I also think that what it can also, you just can spend so much of your time so consumed. That's the other isolation point. You're just consumed. Just think about, the amount of social media apps that you may have that the normal person, like, if you have Snap, you have Instagram, you have Twitter, maybe you have Threads now, maybe you have TikTok. Let's just say those 5. Those are 5 that mostly everyone who has them at some point looks at them every day. Mm-hmm. So that's not, I may connect somebody, I may DM somebody, whatever, but that's not like, I'm not out. I am just here. And that's just that one thing, not including all the other stuff. And I would say too, part of these access points are isolating. Uber Eats. Let's get it to my house. Man, Peloton. I was working about the crib. It's like a lot of that stuff is kind of building into more and more of that isolation. So I know the original question was that, where's it kind of leading? I think it's leading to a lot more of the isolation piece. And I think where it's going to go is I think it's going to continue to build that up. And I think that's where it ends up not being healthy for individuals. And I think it's creating more and more anxiety. I think it's creating more and more depression. I think it's creating more and more. Here's the other one, just people not content. It's crazy. With the access we have, you would think people are content. But life and history and everything has told you, the more things you have, the more discontent you will be. And so now we are living in a very discontent world. And so when you're discontent and there's discontentment that's there, you then begin to look at others as the reason for your discontentment versus actually looking inward to say, man, what's maybe going on with me? But we very rarely look at access, things that are going on that I'm allowing in my life. Is any of that starting to make me discontent at all?
How do you think this impacts the different generations?
Yeah, I think it, I've been trying to think about this a little bit different now about generations because it's so easy to just put, Gen Z. And I think it's just kind of how in the people you were around, if you were someone, quote unquote, you're a millennial, but I don't know, let's just say majority of your, you had a bunch of younger siblings and your whole life is on there. You're going to have more Gen Z vibes about you just because of what the social structure that kind of raised you. But I think if you want to go based off of different kind of generic things, I would say, I think it hits, let's start with I'm Gen X. So I think what it hits with our generation, Gen X can become very I think we can become let's start boomers. Boomers become way more critical, way more looking down, because they just think they're better because, man, well, we didn't have these things and blah, 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 and so it becomes that and they don't become helpful. And so I think that puts a divide. I think when my generation, Gen X, I think it's for Gen X is very different, and I won't stay too long here because Gen X is hammered between millennials and boomers. So we got that boomer work ethic, and some boomer no connected to emotions, but we do got a little bit of emotions because we're kind of right there. But we were latchkey kids where me and our parents both were working, and we were kind of on our own. Mm-hmm. So I think for Gen X, I think they can see both. So I think there's some balance to it, but I still think they can become critical as well. I think Gen Z and millennials, which by the way, if you're older, quit calling Gen Z millennials, please. I cannot tell you.
Wait, that happens?
Yeah, oh my gosh. It really it frustrates me. I hear people do this all the time, people older, man, these millennials, and I'm and what they're meaning, they're kind of putting millennials and Gen Z together. I'm no, those are two different generations, homeboy, two different groups, and they'll be these millennials, and I'm okay, that means you must have heard somebody say that, and now you're calling all this group.
That's Michelle and Peyton.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. That's for funny. You guys don't know, Michelle works for us. Michelle, it works on our team here. Let's just say she's older, I'm saying, by a decent amount than my daughter, who's 12 years old. So but anyway, I think with millennials, what it has led to, I think it has led to a lot of apathy, tons of apathy. Tons of where I think that's where a lot of the things are rising. And I think with Gen Z, I think it's leading to, I think with millennials and Gen Z, because I think, yes, they're different, but I think some of the stuff came up a lot with social media, whatever, I think it's going to lead to a lot of just internal crisis. Because I think where they're going to, where I think your generation is going to go is there's so much access to your life that you haven't learned. You've not had to live with limits at all. I've talked about that before. So you don't know, when you have limits, man, you have built-in resilience. You know what I'm saying? I always joke about it, but when back in the day, if I was frustrated with somebody, I just couldn't pick up the phone or go right on social and just kind of at them and let all my emotions fly, right? I had to wait till the next day, and normally I would sleep on it. That was built-in resilience, where you had to learn, man, just life forced you to shut up. It just did. You guys don't have to do that. And so I think what it's led to now is that there's so much, and again, when you have so much access, it's overwhelming. I mean, it just becomes overwhelming. I mean, imagine if I just had all these doors, and just imagine and you were like, okay, the water starts rushing in. And if you close the door, man, it'll stop the water from coming in. But if you have 150 doors, that water is coming in and it becomes overwhelming. I think that's where I feel like for Gen Z millennials, and I think for a lot of people, it's becoming overwhelming to where I think that you're going to start to see, and this is kind of, I said a lot to get to this main point, is this hopeless. I think we're getting ready to head into generations of hopelessness.
Can you share a little bit more about the hopelessness? Like no hope towards what?
I think no hope toward the future. If you're overwhelmed, so if you're drowning, I had a moment like when I was a kid where I was at a pool party and there was a bunch of kids in the pool. I was in there, I was just swimming. Then all of a sudden a bunch of kids would start kids aren't paying attention. And I was an okay swimmer, wasn't a great swimmer. And then all of a sudden, like, all these kids start coming, and then I got pushed underwater. And, man, I was underwater, and there was this moment where I'm underwater, and I'm looking up, and I can't find because there were so many kids, I couldn't find a way up. So I started feeling, like, desperate. And I'll never forget this. And even a moment, like, hope was like, oh my gosh, I can't remember. Like, I was fighting. I'm like, what's going to happen? And I felt like I was like, oh man, I literally would never forget having this moment. Like, I'm going to die. I may die. And it was like this moment of just real hopelessness. And then I was able to find a way up. But I think when you're underwater, when you're overwhelmed, you become hopeless because you don't see a way out. And what I mean is that I think that it's the idea that when all these access points are coming your way, and so comparison starts to hit. So you become overwhelmed with comparison. You become, because here's the thing right now. We're living in a market that is changing. And it's going to be here for a minute, where you look at interest rates. I mean, you look at the ability, me and you talk about this, to try to buy a house. Like, I mean, it's coming to a place where, like, that was how you built middle-class wealth. That is all changing right now. And so because of that can see where you see a friend who maybe had a parent give them money to get a house. And maybe you don't have that opportunity or a parent who can do that. You can see that and feel like, and you're just looking on social media and they're putting all their stuff up. They're showing all their thing. They show, hey man, check out my Pinterest page and the access points to that could become like, man, comparison. That's just something very small, overwhelming. You click somebody else's job. Now your money is not stretching the way it used to. That can become an overwhelming thing because now you're hearing all this news, all the indoctrination from the idea of political ideologies and so on and so forth. It can all do that. And here's the thing. Here's why. Is when you have all these access points, it's all about what you can do to better your life, what you can do for this. But bettering your life, what is that doing with inflation? What is that doing with high interest rates? What is that doing with that money not stretching the way they used to? What is it doing with the mental health that's with the stuff you're struggling with internally? What is that doing with the fact of like, man, you don't have, you have all these access points, but also you're lonely because now everybody thought, hey, remote work's the greatest way to go, but now you're not around people anymore. And so there's the overwhelming where you're at home, and maybe you're at home and you don't see anybody for several days because you see them on a screen, but you don't see them in person. There's just so many of those things that kind of just inundate you. And then we're just getting more and more information and more books and more ways to get better at ourselves and self-help. And I heard someone say this, and this will get to hopelessness, is that I heard this, somebody who I quote a lot, Mark Sayer, say this. What has happened is that tech companies have now, with AI, with everything, have just now started to just exploit us through just all the stuff to buying. Where now, man, it's okay to go on Target, get this thing, go to this targeted ad for you, this, go do this. And now all of a sudden, you're just buying things, and now you find yourself even in debt. And so now we're living off of debt. Now rates are rising. I mean, all this stuff is there. So now you find yourself just in a debt where money was cheap to borrow. And now you're like, dude, what do I do? And you're underwater. And so now you start to get hopeless because you used to think, okay, by the time I'm 30, everybody says this all, man, by the time I was this age, I thought I'd have this. By the time I'm this age, I thought I'd have this. And all of us have lived up into a right market for a long time. And now it's not going to be that way. So I think there's going to be a lot of hopelessness that's there. And the more information, and just think about this. Think about how when you just open up anything that has anything to do with the news, how bad and negative and terrible. I mean, listen, we live here, and there's some people international listen to our podcast, but like here in America, I mean, like you think about the presidential election. Fam, we got 2 dudes who probably will run for president who are so freaking old. Like, I'm hopeless. Like, I got to fight that just because of that. Joe Biden walks off the White House line, he's 87. That's freaking insane. We got a potential president who may be in prison running for office. It's like, and these dudes and these women who are old won't get out of the way. I give on my little high horse because that's hopeless. You just hear this, you're like, dude, what are we doing? Man, again, here's another thing. Walk outside. Everybody talk about climate, man. I've been walking on Tallahassee, man. I'm in head. I feel like I literally, is Mars descended to you? Like, it's all this stuff. And I think we're heading to that crisis, hopeless moment. But, on the other side of that, which we can get into, I mean, I'm personally full of hope. But I think that's where we're heading, is really in this hopeless thing. And I think access points can really build that. It just because you're just getting so inundated with so much stuff that's putting you underwater.
What advice would you give to someone who may be leading an individual who's younger, whether they're a parent, a boss, a coach, whomever, if they are trying to develop somebody who does have this overload of access points? Mm-hmm. What advice would you give to them?
That's a good question. I think the first thing you have to do is you have to come to a place of evaluation, of a real evaluation of a couple things. One, what season of life are you in? That's the first thing. You may be in a season of life where you're in a learning season. I heard someone say it before, man, when you're in your 20s and you're in a real, like that, 15, 18 to your 30s, and you're always learning. Hear me, I'm an avid learner, but like you're really learning. So you may be taking in more information. So that's the season you're in. You may be in a season of life where you're focusing on this one task, so you need to focus there. I think you have to have an awareness of season. I think you have to have an awareness of really coming to a place of understanding. We talk a lot about this calling, purpose. Like, what do you do? Like, what do you feel like underneath? Not job, but what do you feel called to? Also, this other thing of like really at that point in time, like say job or assignment that you may be on during that time, and you may have to be learning about that. I think it's just all about where you're at. You have to become aware of like where you're at, and then where you're going. I think those are all different ways to start to evaluate. So I'll ask somebody, man, where do you feel like you're at right now? And then I'll say, hey, where do you feel like you're going? Because now you start preparing for that. So those two things can at least allow you to know, what am I going to be consuming? What am I not? If you are, if you're a young parent right now, here's the thing. You have to maybe limit, because of how it impacts you, all your dreams and visions right now of all this, like, let's just say if you're a young mom, and you just had a brand new baby. Maybe right now, or let's say mom, say just a young parent, and like, man, all the visions of traveling and all that, you're like, dude, you got like a tiny human, like, and money's tight. You may not be able to do that. So just, man, having like your Pinterest like vacation board right now, that may just constantly make you just upset. You may not be able to do that. I think if you're a young person or anybody, and you start looking at somebody else and you compare, you may have to cut off following that person. So that's an access point. So I think you have to know where you're at. I said a lot to say know where you're at and actually know where you're going. You got to be able to evaluate that first.
Mm-hmm. So that's to the person who does have all of the access points. Mm-hmm. But when you think about the boss, because we do see this, or the parent who is like, you're just not resilient, you just don't work hard enough. Like, there's a little bit of a lack of understanding of everything that's coming at the people the person that they're leading. Yeah. What advice would you give to that person?
I think what a really good leader does, a really good leader, as we talk about it here a lot, is a non-anxious leader, or we say a self-differentiated leader. Self-differentiated leaders are people who understand who they are, but they also have empathy. I think you have to lead with empathy, and what empathy is a willingness to have an understanding of where someone's at, not to see them and ridicule them. So let's first start there. And I think the other thing, be a problem solver. That's one of the biggest issues I'm seeing right now. I'm not seeing my generation, older generations, be problem solvers anymore, to actually help. What we do is that we have become the group that is complaining so much and not helping, not figuring it out. So I would tell those who are older, look, start stepping in to start trying to help, be willing. I mean, I'll tell you, I just have seen it. Those who are younger, they really are open for help. They really are. I mean, I spent the other night, a couple hours with two young guys who I think are going to be real rock stars. I mean, one is working in the front office of an NBA team. Another's an entrepreneur. And we just sat in a cigar lounge, and we just sat there and I talked with them for about a couple hours. I mean, and they were just asking me questions. And it was like they want help. They want to know. And so I would tell you, lead with empathy. Stop just saying they got so much coming their way. I cannot imagine growing up with the stuff that, like, in my development years, what you guys are facing. And I think we have to understand, guys, like, we didn't have this. We had like ABC News and NBC and like CBS. Like, I mean, they have so much crap that you guys see and access into your life. I just think that we have to have way more empathy and start to try to say, hey, let's get to the root. Because I still think we're dealing with like the outside. So we're still dealing with like social media or like, or a man like, consumerism or capitalism or what. We start dealing with all that stuff. No, let's get to the root. The root is there's too many access points. Doesn't mean anything's good, but like, man, you can't do everything. And that's another big part. I think people have to come to reality, man, there's only so much a human being can consume and do. And we got to understand our limits a little bit.
About how many access points do you think the average person can handle? And knowing that most of us, almost all of us are average, by the way.
Yeah.
You regular.
I think, if you've been new to the pod, if you're new to the pod, that's what we say. Most people, hey, words of Uncle CY, you regular. Everybody want to be extraordinary. And I tell people, you become extraordinary when you actually realize you're ordinary. And, but here's what I would say. I don't know if there's a specific number. I would say, so I'll just kind of start. Let me just start personally. Right now, what I felt, remember I talked about evaluations, where you are, where you're going. What I felt like where I'm at right now is really limiting even more content and more information. So I've actually limited the amount of podcasts. I mean, I was a guy, had 45 podcasts I was subscribed to, and somebody's, I want to watch this. I actually have limited my podcast. I actually try to only listen to one podcast. So this will get to hopefully for everybody else. But I listen to like one podcast a day. That's like something that's like growing me, challenging. If I listen to a news podcast or a leadership podcast, business podcast. If I listen to another podcast, it's like what I call a fluff podcast. It's like I've been really into movies and stuff lately. So I've been like listening to like movie podcasts, reviews, stuff like that, where it's just like, it's not a lot of stuff consuming my whatever, because what I have felt like I needed to really look internal. I have done a lot of life. There've been a lot of leadership situations. And what I have felt is that I really need to look inward to say, man, what have I really learned from this? Why have there been success? Why have there been failures? What am I seeing in the world? How can I really help? And I think there's a lot that's there. So I've been limiting books. I try, I'm taking my time through a book right now. I'll listen to an autobiography, but I'm very I'm mindful. If I don't listen or read, I used to be so upset. Man, I didn't listen to leadership stuff, or I didn't read this today. Now I'm just kind of like, no, I don't. I'm very, I'm really been focused on reading, understanding my Bible even better, blah, blah, blah. But I think so. And then, anyway, that's one part of my life. So kind of, I always go long roads to get to like your point. But I think for an individual, I think you have to have, I think there's like main access points, and then there may be some sub places. So I think you have to realize, okay, maybe you're looking at professionally, like personal, family, and then maybe there's this idea of, outside of your personal family, there may be the idea of like social. Those three kind of access points. So there's like your professional access point, there's your personal family, maybe, personal family. And then I think there's the idea of like social, that could be friendships, relationships, or your social media, kind of like your outward facing stuff that you may do, like podcasts you listen to. Social media apps, relationships, all that kind of a social thing. I think those are three main ones. And then I think you can drill it down from there. But I think you have to limit those main access points. So like, should you be looking at, in my opinion, like 7 or 8 apps a day on social? Probably not. I think that's way too much stuff that actually gets, hit into your life.
If you had to rate yourself, how well would you say you do at access points?
I would have told you 2 years ago, 1 or 2. I would say now, I would say I've gone from like a 2, probably, and really a lot in this last year and a half, 6 or 7. And honestly, here's the reason why a lot of this has come to me too, because I got sick. A lot of what I'm finding out with, being diagnosed with Graves' disease was that it was a lot of it was kind of what set it off was stress. And there were life stresses, but I also think there was like access point stresses in my life. I think that I allowed so many things to come in my life that were access point stresses that cause, relational. That's another one that, I didn't get into. It's like, man, is that access point relationships. Man, you can't be friends with everybody. Mm-hmm. You can't have like, I got 10 best friends. No, you can't. No, absolutely, you cannot. And so I used to like allow that, and again, one of the things pastoring, it's like everybody's opinion of me. That's an access point. And so all that stuff was there. And so it really led to, I think, my body breaking down to where now my body has forced me to say, nope. So I have to. And it's been one of the greatest, I talk about in those like tough moments, if you're willing to learn from it, it's been a great blessing because I've really limited it and I'm still working on it. Like, man, what matters to me the most and what matters to me in the season of life that I'm in. And so I think I've gone from like a 2 to probably like a 6 or a 7 right now. And sometime I'll drop back because, I'll get back into an old habit or, but I'm just really working to kind of keep pushing forward that way.
One of the things, as we're talking about this, tying it back to the podcast that we just previously dropped on ownership, was how much, if you have an overload of access points in your life, how limited you can actually own the things that you are supposed to care about or that you feel called to or that you're supposed to pay attention to within that season of your life. And I think that it's too often that because people don't have, always bringing everything back to authenticity. If you don't have a proper view of who you are, so like a grander vision for your life and your values, and also where you're at in that season and how it's going to get you to where you're trying to go with your goals, you're never going to be able to bring things down to the street level to things like social media apps, like what social media apps you should pay attention to or what content you should consume, because you don't have a grid to run that through. And so it's basically just whatever is important in culture, whatever is the thing, or also what just seems fun and light and fuzzy to you, when that really might not be the best thing in order to get you to where you're trying to go.
I agree. And I think that when you're trying to when you're trying to make a dent or just everybody wants to those ideas of being great and making impact and being a great friend and being, being good at your job and being a good citizen and, and maybe having a skill or, a hobby that you do well, whatever. People just want to, you don't have to be the best, but just want to do some stuff better. Like there's sacrifice that's there. I mean, at the basement of it, that's what it comes down to. And you're right. There's no grid. And I think when you don't understand who you are, you're not aware, then you don't actually know. And a lot of this stuff I've learned just through, I guess, the beauty of like coaching and training, when I was doing basketball skill stuff, it was such a thing because that was my sweet spot. That was my gift. My gift was to get players to actually understand who they were. And then we built their game around that. And then I would bring people in who could help them in places maybe where I wasn't the best technically at that. But it always is stripping a player down and realize, no, this is who you are and limit it. You know what I mean? Like I tell people watch Stephen Curry play basketball and there's so much complexity to his game. But in the end of the day, when you strip Steph Curry down to it, there's about 2 or 3 things he does at an elite level. and he works on it. You watch his workouts. He has limited, like there's, Steph Curry's going to, he golfs. We've been seeing Steph lately. Steph's been on his side quest hard, on the with Paramore on tour. He's up there with Paramore. I
love those videos.
My man's been golfing, he's doing all this stuff, right? But when you listen to anybody talk about him, number one, his family is super important to him. The second thing for him is his basketball career. Everything else revolves around that. Like Steph's going to get his work in. Steph's going to get, he golfs, he's going to get his work in. And Steph's going to be with his family. Those two are main things for him. Everything else falls around that. And so he's going to have to say a lot of no's. So I think I used to say this a lot. If you're going to be somebody who really tries to be an authentic leader, what you say yes to has to be surrounded by a wall of no's. Your yes has to be surrounded by a wall of no's. That's very hard, depending in our world today, depending on if you're a people pleaser, depending on whatever, like people have access to you. Mm-hmm. So you have to say no. I mean, there's so many times people are asking me, hey, can you do this? Can you do this? And I don't want to be a jerk. I feel like I'm a pretty decently approachable person. So when you're an approachable person, people just naturally think, oh yeah, he can come do this. Or you've grown a ton. There's people who were with you 2 years ago and maybe they've gone away or whatever. They knew you this way. And now all of a sudden, I know for me personally, I'm like, man, yeah, 2 years ago, I didn't have a business where it's at. I didn't have kids who have a couple more years left in my house. I did not have church is where it's at. I did not have Equal Shot where it's at. I did not have, health, like all these things. And so people still want you. And I say that they think they have access to you. So to say no to them, they feel like I'm big time. I'm not big timing you. I just know I can't give you that anymore. Mm-hmm. That's one thing too. I think you have to understand, the more things start to happen, the more you hone in, the more you're going to have to say no to people. And that's really interesting how they're going to respond. But that's limiting access. You can't have all these access points in your life. And I think that's really important.
You mentioned a little bit about wanting to go into the relationship portion of it a little deeper.
Yeah, I think that, man, this is something that's important because I am a big proponent in relationships. I think relationships are gold. I think it's the most... I believe it's one of the most valuable things, in life is relationships. And what I worry about today is that our isolation, and even the communication part of things, it's via DM or, you think about dating apps, whatever. People don't communicate and there's all this access, but we don't really manage our relationships. Not everybody is supposed to be in your life. And here's the other thing. And the people who some of you think should be in your life shouldn't be in your life, because maybe those people, you think they have influence. You think they have status, and that's going to get you somewhere. It was funny because I'm, getting so much older. I'm so, being married for, I've been married for 23 years. Here's what's so interesting to me. For 22 years is that I was talking to young guys the other night, and they were talking about like dating now. And I was listening to them like, dude, that sounds exhausting. Because they were like, yeah, they're talking to girls and all they want to know. Like, they're asking questions like, well, how many, what's your Instagram? Like, asking your follower count. I'm like, word? That's wild.
If somebody asked me that,
dude,
I would throw up.
That's what I'm saying. That's wild behavior. But my point, though, is that I think that here's the thing. Because why? Does that give somebody that for them? Or that gives me greater access? That gives me greater access to whatever they think you can bring them. That gives them greater access. And so that's just going to lead to more and more emptiness, because not everything you're allowing in your life is good. Not every relationship you're allowing you're good. Listen, those people you listen to all the time on podcasts, that's a relationship you're forming, even though you may not know that person. So who are you listening to all the time? If all you ever listen to is someone who only speaks from one side of the political aisle and all their stuff is so just venomous negative left or right, you're going to start to do that. That's a bad access point. And so I just think that we have to start being really mindful of the relationships in our lives. Relationships are gold. Relationships are critical. Relationships will define you, good or bad. And so I think, I want to really encourage you, before you get into all the personal stuff, social media, whatever, I would ask you, man, evaluate your life. Here's another thing. Relationships in your life, somebody in your life that's a good person in life, you shouldn't always have people always tell you yes. You should have that friend in your life where you're like, I know if I ask this dude, man, he's going to ask me 8 million questions. He's always going to be the one that's going to be like, you don't want to ask him. You need that friend in your life, because that friend's going to make you think about what you're doing and save you. So it's not just about everybody's going to just give you positive vibes. It's about people who rock with you. I tell it to my son all the time, rock with the people who rock with you. That's so important. Rock with the people you rock with you. If they don't rock with you, it's okay. They got their own set of friends, but stop trying to be in circles that actually don't want you in the circle. Be in the circle that you have. And your circle may be 2 people. Your circle may be 10 people. But get in there. Relationships are key and vital. And I think you need to really limit those. And you need to know who are you giving access to relationally, because that's going to define you probably more than anything else.
I have one more thing.
Okay.
Next time you see us, we'll be 1 year older.
We will be 1 year older.
Because my birthday's August 13th and Adrian's is August 14th.
There it is.
And we're Leo babies.
There it is. So, hey, if you want to hit your boy up, Adrian Crawford, on that Venmo.
Cash at me.
You know what I'm saying? Hey, Adrian Crawford, that Venmo. You know what I'm saying? Hit your boy up. You know what I'm saying? No, but yeah, we'll be a year older. Hey, August is a great month. You know what I'm saying? Hey, it's Kobe month. You know what I mean? Kobe month. I mean, so hey, I hope today was helpful for all of you. Again, this content is something that I'm really passionate about. Something we're going to be unpacking, even going down deeper levels to it. But I would just tell you today, just start being aware. Everybody wants to kind of start off.
Just ask yourself why.
Yeah, just ask yourself why. Everybody wants to start off with like, man, here we go. Access points. I'm about to start cutting all this stuff up. No. Just think about. Start writing down, what all am I consuming? What all has access? Just start to just be aware of it. Just kind of think about it a little bit and just write it down. Don't change anything yet. Just write it down and just start to evaluate. Like Bree said, just ask why. Man, why do I listen to this? Do I really need to listen to this? And kind of go from there. And so as we unpack access points more and more, man, we're going to talk about how I think this is impacting, I think, people's we talk a lot about work-life balance and things like that. And we're going to talk about how I think the lack of putting boundaries up in these places are impacting that. I think it's impacting marriages, families, how it's impacting society. So we'll be doing deeper dives into this. Until next time, keep writing new rules.